But so kind of building off the good news here, Detroit goes 1-3 this past week. Probably all 4 games they could have won. They were competitive in all 4 games. The Grizzlies game they definitely could have won, and Brooklyn they definitely could have won going to overtime, but did not end up winning the Brooklyn or Memphis games. We knew they were going to lose to Washington this past week, just continuing that disastrous record versus, I think it was Chicago, Washington, Charlotte. They still are winless.
What's it, 6 years? 6 years winless in Washington? Is that what it is?
That. It's insane.
It's pathetic. I think it's 6 years winless in Washington, maybe. Come on now.
Just horrendous. But listen, it's okay. All good stuff. Detroit now has the 5th hardest schedule going forward for the rest of their season. Ranked amongst other schedules here in the NBA from everybody else. So I feel pretty darn good about that for Detroit, knowing that, hey, they sit in the 10th seed. They're kind of right in the mix of, they could probably fall to comfortably 12. They could rise to the 8th seed still in that middle ground, just a half game behind Chicago, who's currently the 9th seed. But nonetheless, I'd love to see Detroit continue to play those young kids, ride out this difficult schedule, finish as the 12 seed in the East, and cruise your way to a friendly draft pick in June.
Well, that's the thing here. And in the East, it's going to be tough to get worse than the 12th seed. But theoretically, they could finish with the 4th, the 5th worst record in the NBA if all things go right for them. If all things go right for the Pistons.
If everything goes right, they'll be terrible.
They could finish with the 4th worst record in the league. I don't think that any of the Knicks, the Cavaliers, and the Atlanta Hawks will pass them in the East. And I think Golden State, even with Stephen Curry coming back on March 1st, I don't think they're going to catch them. I think if you're looking at the West, Minnesota and Sacramento can lap Detroit. And I think Charlotte and Washington can lap Detroit too. Washington's about to get healthier. They're expecting Rui Hachimura back. Mo Wagner's been getting in some running and conditioning, so he'll be back soon. And Charlotte, they're a team that they just don't commit to rebuilding. They don't commit to losing. They play the young guys, and they still win games. So if everything goes right for the Pistons, they can get all the way to the 4th worst record in the NBA, which it should absolutely be their goal at this point right now.
And that's the thing. You look at the bottom of the East with New York and Cleveland both at 12-34 and Atlanta at 11-35. Reminder, Detroit currently at 17-30. I don't know if any of those 3 teams will reach 17 wins this season, so Detroit might be in a tough spot getting below them. But man, wouldn't that be nice to just continue to bottom out? You don't want to compete for that 8th seed. You just don't want to do it. We'll get more into that later. I don't want to, maybe start taking away from other things we're going to get into here on the pod. But the bottom line is, with the 5th hardest upcoming schedule, I'm a big fan of it.
It's good for the Pistons because you want to have the best draft position possible, even if you're in a weak draft. Because at the end of the day, if you want to move that pick, you can. If not, it gets you up on the board where you can have the opportunity to take one of the better players, again, even in a weaker class. And I think we've all kind of got ideas on who the Pistons could go after. There's a lot of different point guards in this class. There's one wing in this class that if the Pistons are, they're at 4, 5, or 6 and he's available, I get some of the concerns with him. I absolutely still pull the trigger on him and take him. And it just makes all the sense in the world for the Pistons. They continue to disappoint, and it's their fault. I get the injuries, I get it all, but it's still their fault that they can't go out and beat Charlotte and Atlanta and Washington and Chicago. It's their fault that they can't do that. So that's why they're here. That's why we're talking about the Pistons needing to lose as many games as possible at this point in the season and go from there. The Pistons shouldn't be mad at people for wanting them to lose. They've kind of put themselves in their own position. So going for a high draft pick, adding another young piece, it just makes sense at this point.
I couldn't agree more, Aaron. Something has to change. We keep playing this game, and we talk about it all the time, of being in the middle. kind of going for the win, kind of not. This whole middle ground, it's got to change. And the Pistons proved it in this 4-game stretch that they have no business making a push for the playoffs. None. 1-3 with this stretch, and they're losing to teams like Chicago, Washington, Memphis. No business going for it.
They have 12 losses against non-playoff teams in the Eastern Conference.
That's pathetic because if they win, let's say they still drop 3 of those games. They have 9 more wins and 3 less losses. Like, we're talking about this team in a completely different sense. They're sitting at, 26 and 27? Right? Or they're right around there. They're 7th in the Eastern Conference. It's not great, but they're in the playoffs right now.
But it's a totally different conversation at that point.
And it shows that they can at least handle their business against the lesser teams. They haven't even handled their business against the lesser teams. That's why it makes no sense as to why people are going around saying the Pistons should be trying to make the playoffs. The Pistons should be playing their best players and going after a playoff spot and maybe trying to go out there and add a piece at the deadline. It's ridiculous. If you cannot beat the bottom feeders in your conference, you have no business trying to win. I don't really think that that's anything far off to say. I don't think that's an irrational thing to say. It's basically a fact.
I think it's spot on to say. Spot on. You're dealing with these injuries. You can't be the bottom feeders. There's no point. I can't. And I understand getting the young guys that playoff experience. Letting Sekou see that. Getting Luke more experience. Svi getting experienced. I get all that. But at the end of the day, it's going to keep you in the middle. And I'm not here for the middle. I'm tired of it.
Right.
We've said it a million times, and it's just so annoying, and it just takes your toll on you as a fan. I can't do it anymore. I'm tired of the middle. It's nonsense.
The thing about that playoff experience, too, is you have to look at it as Detroit getting a better draft pick this year and being able to retool a couple things and coming back next year where, hey, maybe next year they are playing for that 6th or 7th seed, and Sekou's playing a ton, Luke's healthy playing a ton. Maybe you draft a point guard this year. Whoever you draft this year is in the mix, whether he's a starter or he's in that second unit, but he's playing for you. And you see what happens with Christian Wood. Where's he in the mix? But you start to build more of an identity, what direction you're going forward with, and then you go for the playoffs. This year, there's no need to push. You need another piece in the draft. You need another solid piece in the draft. So, you're not trying to draft a rotational guy. You're trying to draft a guy that is in your starting lineup for the future. So, go get that guy now. And then, if you can make that push next year, make that push. Unless if you start terrible and you decide, you know what? Let's go get another asset. Obviously, you can't do that forever because then you start to get yourself in a position where, okay, Luke Kennard's 27 and we haven't done anything with him. And then it's kind of the same boat you've been in with Dre where Dre's been young all this time and then now we've never done anything with him. So, obviously, you can't just push it off forever, but there's no point this year making that push. This is not the year to do it. You'll have more of an identity in this offseason when you decide the direction you want to go, which will allow you next year to then start that push to get the young guys in playing time in the playoffs. Hopefully to then the following year be in a spot to go win in the playoffs.
And that's the thing. You can want to win and be successful, but you have to keep in mind that you're playing a lot of young guys right now. It's important to continue to play those guys so that when you actually are good enough to compete for a playoff spot and compete in the playoffs, those guys have experience. Those guys have been put on the floor. And it's not, Svi's played in one game for us this year, like what happened last year when he got traded to Detroit. They're giving these guys these minutes now, and that's what they should be doing. If they still want to put those guys on the floor and try to win, fine, so be it. But at least they're doing it with the young guys on the court. Jordan Bone, Lewis King, those I got their two-way contract players, but they have both shown that they have some talent.
Yep.
I know Lewis King had a terrible summer league, and I thought that was just a waste of a two-way contract for the Pistons after what he did. in Summer League. But the few games that he's played, especially the last two where he's gotten some decent minutes against Memphis and yesterday, he's done some nice things. He's shooting the ball. He's doing a couple different things offensively. He has the size to be a player. He has the makeup of an NBA player.
It's almost like that Kyrie Thomas confusion where it's like, why is the Summer League so poor looking? Yet when he's up with the big boys playing maybe some meaningless minutes, even though Louis King's minutes haven't been meaningless so far, he looks good. Mm-hmm. Honestly, I've enjoyed watching Louis King's past couple games get his minutes. I think he looks very much like he belongs. He's just still finding his spot, which is fine. And that's another thing. Going back to winning. If they're winning with the young, if they had the young guys rotation of Luke and Bruce and Svi and Bone and Sekou and King, and they were winning, then so be it.
Exactly.
They're winning.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fine. But to go for it with the older guys, that's not going to take you anywhere. That's where I have a hard stance of no.
Yeah.
So I agree with what Aaron's sentiment there.
If they were like Charlotte, playing the young kids and finding a way to win games, you're not going to get mad at it. You're not going to get mad. Oh, Sekou went for 24. Christian Wood dropped in 15. Jordan Bone got some nice minutes off the bench. Zvi went for 15. Okay, yeah. Fine. Pistons win that game. They win the game. That's great. That's what you want to see.
Yeah. No, and that's kind of just where I'm at right now. And Ryan, you brought up Kyrie Thomas. We still haven't really heard much about him. He's been out with an ankle injury. He's been doing some light stuff, but when he's healthy, that's another guy that the Pistons should give a chance to play. I get, again, he had a bad summer league. He didn't look good, but you don't give up on a player that you traded assets for, and the Pistons traded picks to be able to get Kyrie Thomas, so he's another guy that they should be playing when he comes up. That's the important thing for this season. You want to go out and try to win next year. You want to go out and try to win the year after that. Fine. But look at your roster. You have young players that are going to be back on your team next year under contract. So it would be wise to play them this year so they get that experience, that development under their belt now, so that come next year, it's not their first real minutes in the NBA.
Agreed. And these pieces that they have look like pieces that can be part of a winning team.
Yes.
They need, that star around them, obviously, like every team does, their leader, their best player. But a guy like Svi, and honestly, in the few minutes we've seen so far, maybe Louis King and Christian Wood, these guys, Luke Kennard, Bruce Brown, these are pieces that can be a part of a winning team. They just need, if Sekou's supposed to be the star, which I think he will be, clearly in today's NBA, you need to put another star with them.
You need a minimum one, if not two more.
You need to have two top flight players on your team. That at least. That appears to be the shape of the league.
Yep.
But those pieces around them, those seem to me like those can be winning pieces.
Right.